Good day, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on Candy foreign currency pricing and tax codes. My name is Jijo Joshua, Senior Consultant here at the CCS Gulf office in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, UAE. It is my pleasure to present this webinar to you. In this webinar, I'll take you through how one can use currency codes in a job where resources are bought in multiple currencies. How these resources could be expressed in their currency of origin. The bill of quantities can be displayed in multiple currencies. And we'll also cover the use of tax codes in this webinar. Due to the large number of people logged into this webinar, we will not be able to answer any questions during the webinar. However, please submit your questions during the session with the function provided on the screen. At the end of the webinar, we will collate these questions and send the answers to everyone that's registered for this webinar via email. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and that you will receive a link to download it. There is a webinar once a month on various Candy topics. Should you not be able to attend the webinar at the given time frame, then please do register for the webinar, as this will entitle you to receive a recorded copy of the webinar. Let's get started. Right. Currency controlled at source. Resource level provides for a currency breakdown per bill item. You would know that a bill item is a combination of many resources. Your net rate is, there's a worksheet behind your net rate. Different resources are used behind that rate. And you could be buying them in different currencies. So a currency code gives you a currency breakdown per bill item. Similarly, tax codes allow for a tax breakdown per bill item. Now, when would you find your currency codes and tax codes handy? When the client submission requires your quotation to be in a currency other than your local currency. You're pricing a project in the UAE, the pricing currency or your base currency is dirhams, but the client that you're working with is the US Navy and they want the rates in US dollars. You could be pricing in dirhams, you could submit your quotation to the client or your bill to the client, you're setting rates to the client in US dollars. You would use your currency codes then. When the bill of quantities needs to be displayed and printed in multiple currencies, you're working on a JV project, an international project, you're used to seeing your rates in UAE dirhams, whereas your JV partner, who's an international contractor, would prefer to see the rates and amounts in dollars. You could use the currency codes very well then. Pricing a job with resources from different countries with resource rates quoted in the currency of origin. You might be pricing a job in the UAE, but you might be buying cables from Europe in euros, or you might be importing your diesel from Saudi Arabia in Saudi riyals. Currency codes could be used then. And you could use tax codes when you need to add and report on tax cost implications on a tender due to taxes, import duties, freight, etc. So we'll look at the uses of tax codes and currency codes in detail as we go on ahead. The agenda for this webinar, we'll be looking at the pricing currency, defining the pricing currency, defining the foreign currencies in relationship to the pricing currency, copying from the currency codes from the master. We'll look at how to define the primary foreign currency, the resource rates. We will be talking about the resource base rate and the final rate to be specific, allocating currency codes to resources, dual currency bill settings, multiple currency subcontract adjudication, multiple currency reporting, tax codes, allocation, and reporting. That's the agenda for the day. Starting up with the pricing currency, the foreign currencies, and the primary foreign currency. Most of the action on this webinar would happen on Candy itself. So I would quickly move on to Candy. We've set up a job for you here. That's my project, currently within the estimating module. To open up the bill of quantities, the shortcut be to open up your bill of quantities. There is my bill of quantities, priced, calculate, you can see my heading totals. My estimator has worked out the net rates, and I know there is worksheets and resources behind these rates. Now, what you would notice is there's no mention of what currency is this rate in. Is it in dirhams? Is it in US dollars, Omani riyals? I don't have a clue. That's the first thing that you would do when you start up with a job is go and define your pricing currency or your base currency. Now, where do I go about to define my pricing currency? You would go to the blue hammer, which is your estimating definitions and settings. On the blue hammer, you would go to general settings 5.1, and this is where you go and define your pricing currency. In this case, on this project is in UAE. I'll be pricing this project in AED, UAE dirhams, so that's my pricing currency. The bulk of the resources on this project would be bought in AED, and I'm reporting to the client in AED. You could also choose to report to your client in any other currency that you would wish to. You could define foreign currencies. I've defined a couple of currencies here, and these foreign currencies are defined in relationship to the pricing currencies, which is AED. Now, where do you go to define your pricing currencies or your foreign currencies and the currency exchange rates? That's again defined under the blue hammer 4.4, currency exchange rates. And here I can see that we've already defined a few currencies. So there is your currency codes defined. The first one that we've defined is GBP for pound sterling. And the exchange rate, of course, is 4.95. 1 pound sterling is 4.95 AED. The factor is the value which is used to convert your foreign currency back to your base currency or your pricing currency, being AED. The second code that I've defined, second currency code that I've defined is NE for Egyptian pounds. And I know 1 dirham, 1 AED is 4.81 Egyptian pounds. So I want my factor to work out to convert the Egyptian pounds back to AED. So we've used the reciprocal function here. And then I've got Omani Riyal. 1 Omani Riyal is 10 AED, that's my factor. And 1 US dollar is 3.67 AED. Now, the currency code can be up to 3 characters max, alphabetic. The currency name can be 10 characters, the exchange rate, and the factor is the number to convert, or the value to convert your foreign currency back to your base currency. You could also have this 40-character comment, which is very useful when you're reviewing tenders, just to make a note as to when was this currency rate last updated. I can come and overtype this comment that this was last updated on the 14th of November 2017, which is today. And I can copy the same comment down using Control-K or Control-J, the shortcuts you're aware about. Let's start and have a look at how do we go about defining some new currencies. So I'm going to define a currency code here, SAR, which is for Saudi Riyal. And 1 Saudi Riyal, I know the exchange rate is 0.98. The moment you type in the exchange rate, that reflects in the factor as well. The factor is the value that you would use to convert your foreign currency to your base currency, which is AED, or your pricing currency, which is AED. And I can go and copy the same comment down. Now let's add one more INR this time, Indian rupee. And 1 Indian rupee or 1 AED is 17.67 Indian rupee. The exchange rate reflects in the factor as well. However, I want this factor to be the value to convert my foreign currency, which is Indian rupee, back to AED. So I want how much is 1 Indian rupee to an AED. So I can use the reciprocal function, which says 1 Indian rupee is actually 0.0565 AED. Copy the comment from above, Control-J. So we've defined our currency codes. You can define a maximum of 16 currency codes apart from your pricing currency, which is AED. And if you've defined these currency codes in your master, if you're maintaining your currency code list in the master, you can import these currency codes and the exchange rate from the master straight away. If you want to delete a currency code, let's say, for example, I would like to delete my currency code for INR. I could keep my cursor on that currency code, use the X tool from my toolbar, and it'll ask you, are you sure you want to delete? Candy reconfirms, and what Candy would check for you is, have you used this currency code on this job? Have you allocated this currency code to any of your resources? And it will not let you delete the currency code if you've done that. And I know I've created this currency code new, I've not used it against any resources. It allows me to delete INR. So you've defined your foreign currencies here. Let's go back to general settings 5.1. We've defined the pricing currency to be AED. The primary foreign currency, you could go and select any of your currency codes that you've defined, or any of the foreign currencies that you define as the primary foreign currency. And I've selected US dollars to be the primary foreign currency. This is just for ease of reporting. You want your amounts to reflect a certain currency, you can use your primary foreign currency. You could take an example, as I mentioned before, is you're pricing a project in AED, but you want to report your selling rates to your client in US dollars, so you want to see AED and US dollars side by side. You could select your primary foreign currency to be US dollars. Right, so we've selected our primary foreign currency to be US dollars, the pricing currency is AED, the currency exchange rates are done. Let's go and have a look at the bill document. So let's click on OK. Let's go to the Blue Book. On the Blue Book, let's go to the section called Estimating Bills. And what I've done here is I have set up a few documents for you to have a look at. Now, the first document that I would like you to go and take a look at is your markup bill with the selling rates and the primary foreign currency. So here, this is my BOQ. It's got the net rate in dirhams. If I click on calculate to bring up the heading total, so there's my net rate in dirhams. There's my selling rate in dirhams, and there is my selling rates in US dollars and the amounts. Why? Because I've selected my primary foreign currency to be US dollars. Now, what I'm missing here is my net rates in US dollars. I don't see my net rates in US dollars. I could do this, view. I could add those columns into my layout, view. Add and remove columns, and from the column pick list, you could go and select what column you need. I need my net rate in primary foreign currency and my net bill amount, and I want it after the net rate and net amount in AED. So I select net rate in primary currency, which is US dollars, net bill amount in primary currency, which is US dollars. Again, so there you go. We've added those two columns. Click on calculate. So now, on the same bill, side by side, I've got my net rate in AED, I've got my net rate in US dollars, I've got my selling rate in AED, and my selling rate in US dollars, side by side. Very quick to report. Looks very simple, isn't it? Multiplying the rate and amount by a factor, nothing great about it. But the currency codes have a much deeper purpose. Let's go and have a look at this rate. Clearance strip side, the estimator has worked out the rate for this item to be 3.04 dirhams per square meter. But double click on the rate for this item, it would show me the worksheet behind it. And then we're very familiar with this document. And my estimator says you would need a digger loader to price this item. You would need 2 tippers to work with a digger loader, and 4 unskilled laborers to assist the equipment, and it's got a productivity there. Now, if I look at the rate for the digger loader, if I double click on the rate for the digger loader, there's a worksheet behind it. It's a complex resource. I've got the hiring charges for the digger loader as a simple resource. I've got my diesel. I've got the driver charges. Now, in all probability, you might be hiring your equipment, the digger loader, you might be paying your plant supplier in US dollars. You might be buying the diesel from Saudi in Saudi riyals, and you might be paying your operator in the local currency, which is dirhams. Now, how do I extract these components out of a compound rate of 3.04? How do I get my US dollar component? How do I get my Saudi riyal component out of that rate, which is 1? Now, this is where things starts getting a bit tricky, and Candy comes to help by currency code. So now what we're going to do is going to go and discuss about resource rates and allocating currency codes to resources. So let's go back to our PowerPoint slide. We'll discuss the resource rates, base rate and final rate, and how to go and allocate currency codes to resources at source. Getting back onto Candy. If you open up our resource list, How do we go and open up a resource list? We click on the button R, which is the shortcut, and we have our resources neatly structured under headings. So I've got my resources structured in the alphanumeric sequence. I've got logical headings there. Now, if I go and have a look at diesel, which is a material resource, type M, resource code is 4514. I'm buying diesel at 2.85 dirhams a liter, and I've got what we call as a resource final rate. That's my final rate. The final rate is a rate which is used on your worksheets, price code worksheets and complex worksheets, and the final rate should always be in your pricing currency. In our case, the pricing currency is AED. So this rate here for diesel, 2.85 AED per liter. Now, if we come further down and have a look at our M&E items, I've got sheet metal here, which is resource code 701002, again, a material resource, 0.8 22 gauge sheet metal. The unit is per square meter. I'm buying the sheet metal per square meter, and the rate here is 59.97. Now, there's a small screen tip here. It says at the base rate. If I double click on the rate, it tells me that the base rate for this resource is 16.37 with US dollars in the bracket. It tells me that I'm buying this resource in US dollars, and you've got the currency cap factor, which is what you've defined, 3.67. You said $1 US was 3.67 AED, and the final rate is now reported in AED to be 59.967. Right, now, I can't see my base rate on this document. Yes, you know that you could go and add your base rates on, but for the purpose of currency codes and tax codes, what we would recommend for you to use, instead of using the normal resource list 1.1, we would recommend that you go to the Blue Book. Under the Blue Book, go to the tab Resources, and you notice that the shortcut for the button R is linked 1.1. What I would then do is I go and select 1.3, right click on it, which is base rate percentages, tax and currency, link, unlink, and link my resource item to this document. So the next time now I click on R, it's not 1.1 but 1.3 that opens up. So there is your document 1.3 base rate percentages, tax and currency. Let's go and have a look at the same resource, sheet metal, which was 701002, 0.8 22 gauge sheet metal. I'm buying it the sheet metal per square meter. The base rate is 16.34. The base rate is a rate which is used to calculate your final rate. The base rate, if you're buying a resource in a foreign currency, the base rate should be in the currency of origin. So in this case, I'm buying the sheet metal in US dollars, so base rate is in US dollars, 16.34 US dollars. How do I know it is in US dollars? Is because I could see the currency code of USD allocated against this resource, and my final rate of 59.97 is calculated. How is it calculated? Base rate is 16.34 multiplied by the currency factor for US dollars, which is 3.67, and your final rate in AED is 59.967. On the right hand side, I've got the bill quantity usage, which tells me on this project, you're allowed to use 1,980 square meters of the sheet metal. And to buy 1,980 square meters of sheet metal at 59.97 dirhams per square meter, you're allowed to spend 118,000 dirhams. I could go up. Let's do a quick example with diesel. Let's say the diesel on this project is bought in Saudi riyals. Now, you will notice that a lot of resources don't have a base rate yet. That's fine. For the resources that don't have a base rate, what we're assuming is all these resources are bought in the pricing currency, or all these resources are bought in AED. Now, here, diesel in this case, you said you're buying it in Saudi riyals, so the rate in Saudi riyals is 2.8. I'm buying my diesel at 2.8 Saudi riyal per liter. So that's my base rate. Now, if I type in my base rate, you will see my final rate is automatically calculated, and my final rate is equal to the base rate. Why? It's because the base rate is 2.8 and the final rate is 2.8. You haven't got any factors or currency codes acting on it as yet. Now, how do I know that this resource, diesel, is bought in Saudi riyal? I would go against that resource in the currency code column, double click, and allocate the currency code against it. So there is my currency code that I defined for Saudi Riyals, and you said 1 Saudi Riyal is 0.98 AED, and your final rate is calculated as 2.74. So your final rate for that resource diesel is 2.74 dirhams per liter. If I double click on it, it tells me that you're buying this resource in Saudi Riyals, that's the factor 0.98, and that's your final rate calculated. You could also have other factors affecting your final rate. Things like surcharge. You want to add a surcharge. Let's say I want to add a 15% surcharge on this. So now you notice your final rate is now changed from 2.74 to 3.16. Why? It's because I'm buying it in Saudi Riyals. I've got my currency factor to convert it to AED, and then I've got a 15% surcharge that I've typed in. You could also have a tax code acting on it. We'll be discussing tax codes in detail later on. If I double click against the tax code column and let me go and apply a 5% local tax, my final rate is changed again. So now it is 3.31, which is inclusive. I'm buying it in Saudi Riyals. The currency factor of 0.98 to work it back to AED. We've got a local tax here, 5%, and then you've got the surcharge. Now, the final rate, as we mentioned earlier, if you're buying it in the pricing currency, AED, you could very well go and type in your final rate. If you've got a base rate, you must go and update the base rate to get your final rate, to calculate your final rate. Let's go and have a look at the other currency codes allocated. I know my sand here in this example, my river sand, my crusher sand, I'm buying in Omani Riyals, so my base rate is in Omani Riyals, and my final rate is calculated in dirhams. 1 Omani Riyal is 10 AED. I'm buying it at 6.8 Omani Riyal per M cube, and my final rate is calculated at 68 dirhams per M cube. Similarly, the filler sand is bought in from Egypt in Egyptian pounds, and my base rate, I'm buying my filler sand at 312.65 LE, which is Egyptian pounds, and my final rate is calculated back to AED using the currency factor of 0.21 that we've defined under the blue hand. What you could do on the resource list is this. You could do this: view, group by, and custom group your resources. View, group by, custom group by, and then you could say, I would like to group my resources by the currency code. What it tells you then is it tells you what resources are you buying in foreign currency. So here I'm buying my sheet metal in US dollars. I'm adding my roller, my Dynapack roller and my pan compactor in US dollars. I'm buying the diesel in Saudi Riyal. Resource code is 4514. I'm buying it at 2.8 Saudi Riyals per M cube. The final rate is worked out to be 2.74 dirhams per liter. And Candy tells me that on this project, you're allowed to use 47,721 liters of diesel. That is the total quantity of diesel allowed on this project. Candy goes and looks at each and every worksheet where diesel is used as a resource in the rate build-up and calculates that quantity, the total usage for you. And to buy 47,721 liters of diesel at 2.74 dirhams a liter, Candy says you're allowed to spend 130,000 dirhams. And that's my river sand and the crusher sand in Omani Riyals. That's my filler sand bought in Egyptian pounds, and there's my plaster and building sand bought in pounds sterling. So it's very easy to go and extract the foreign currency components. But let's go and have a look what is the impact of allocating these currency codes on the bill. If I go back to my bill document, the blue book, let's go to the section called Estimating Bills. And under Estimating Bills, I would go to the document called Currency Split per Bill Item. I've created this document. You could go and create these documents for yourself. You could add and remove the columns that you need. You could also go and add these documents from here, the blue book, your library, which is a new document, and then you've got your currency split per bill item. So there in the background, I've got my currency split per bill item. So if I click on calculate, what it shows me now is it says the total for this project, the net total is 8.2 million dirhams. However, on this project, you need to budget for 7.7 million dirhams. You will be buying resources, you will be adding resources worth 7.7 million dirhams. You would need 13,000, you need to account for, you need pound sterling worth 13,000 dirhams, you need Egyptian pound worth 36,000 dirhams, you need Omani Riyal worth 137,000. Now you will notice these amounts for the foreign currency are shown in your pricing currency, AED. If you want to see these amounts in your original currency, this is what you would do. You would right click, select the toggle switch, and say, all right, I would like to see these amounts in the original currency. So now it tells you, yes, the total for this project is 8.2 million. We will need to account for 7.7 million AED, 2,632 pounds sterling, 176,000 Egyptian pounds, 13,000 Omani Riyals, and so on. The toggle switch, that is the right click, also allows you to go and select the rate. You could either see the amounts based on the net rate or the gross rate, or you could go and select the quantities as well. If you want to see your splits, currency splits as per your final quantity, Candy allows you to do it with the right click. Let's close this document. Right, so that was the currency splits for you. The next thing on the agenda would be your dual currency bill settings. The dual currency bill settings is used when you want to separate your local component to the foreign component, and the foreign component can be reported in any currency that you've defined. Let's quickly go and have a look in Candy. How do we go about doing it? Again, we go back to the blue hammer. On the blue hammer, we go to 5.3, dual currency options. Let's go and select the currency code for the local component. If you've left it blank, it defaults to AED. The local component here, again, AED, so left it blank. The foreign currency component, I've selected my foreign component to be USD. So any other foreign currencies that I've used against an item, please can be converted to USD and show me the local and the foreign component. Very useful on international projects. Let's see how does it impact our BOQ. Another thing that you must take note of is your decimal places. So had I selected my foreign component to be RO, which is Omani Riyals, I would go and change my rate and my amount decimals to 3 decimal places. I selected my foreign currency component to be US dollars, so I'll go and change my rate and amount decimals to 2 decimal places. Let's have a look on the BOQ. So now if I click on the bill, so Blue Book, we've set up a document for dual currency. Let's double click and open up 3.4a, dual currency. And if I click on calculate, there I can see my total in dirhams. I can also see my currency splits. I could see this currency splits based on my pricing currency, or I could select it based on my original currency, and then you could also see the local and foreign. So if you look at this item here, excavate for working space in Class A material, you will notice you've got the local component, which is AED, and then you've got Saudi Riyals. You're buying your diesel for this item in Saudi Riyals, and you're hiring the equipment in US dollars. All of that is converted to US dollars and reported as a foreign currency. Very useful. We recently had a project in Sri Lanka where the local currency component, which was Sri Lankan rupees, need to be separated from any of the foreign currencies. And the foreign currency component was Japanese yen, because this project was built with the funding from the Japanese government. So that's the dual currency bill settings for you. The next item on the agenda is multiple currency subcontract adjudication, and this can get quite interesting. Coming back to Candy, you have your subcontract packages. You set up your subcontract packages in Candy, which is a feature, which is a tool which you use quite frequently. We've got a package here for painting. 3 subcontractors are quoted for this package: Sea Green, Rainbow Colors, and Art Deco. Now you will see this disparity in the rates, and of course I see that Sea Green's rates have been used in the BOQ. However, if I look at Art Deco's rates, his rates look to be incorrect, or are they incorrect? The rates that he has quoted, one of the subcontractors has quoted in a currency other than your pricing currency. So here I know this guy has quoted in US dollars. How do I know that Art Deco has sent its rates in US dollars is because the currency code selected against this subcontractor is US dollars. So the rates are quoted in US dollars, but the amount, because of the virtue of this currency code that you allocated, the amounts has been worked out to AED. So now when you're comparing, you're doing an apple-to-apple comparison. You've got an apple-to-apple comparison. So the rates are still in US dollars, but the amounts work back to AED. Now, if I decide to use Art Deco's rates in the bill, you will notice the total in the bill now is 51,207, which is the same as the total for sea green. If I decide to use Art Deco's rates in my bill, I could click on Rates to Bill. Brings up the subcontract resource for the painting subcontractor. That's resource code 9016. Unit sum rate of 1. And it doesn't have a currency code yet. And Candy gives me a small warning message, says that because you've got a currency code allocated against the subcontractor, your resource must have a currency code of USD. Now, if I try to neglect or ignore this message and click on OK, it says you can't go any further until you go and allocate a currency code to your resource. So let's go and do that. Let's go back to the resource list R, and we know our resources are structured nicely under headings. My subcontractors are the 9 series. Let's open up your domestic subcontractors, and there is my painting subcontractor. The total for him is 51,000 dirhams. Now, we said we want to use the rates from Art Deco, and Art Deco has quoted in a currency other than your pricing currency, and it's quoted in US dollars, so you need to allocate a currency code. For you to allocate a currency code, 2 rules that you must remember is the currency codes are always allocated to a simple resource. And for you to be able to allocate a currency code to a resource, it must have a base rate. So here, for painting subcontractor doesn't have a base rate yet. I'm going to type in my base rate as 1. And in the currency code column against 9016, I double click and say, okay, this guy, Art Deco, has quoted in US dollars, so I want to use the currency code of US dollars for me to be able to transfer the rates back to the bill. My final rate for this resource is calculated as 3.67. If I double click on the rate, shows me rate of 1 multiplied by the factor, gives me the final rate to be 3.67. Go back to the adjudicator, try transferring this rate now for Art Deco, rates to bill, resource code 9016. You will notice the currency code has been allocated. Copy subcontractor name to resource remarks. Click on OK. Rates transferred 6. Click on OK. And there you see Art Deco's rates have been used on the bill now. So the total, if I click on calculate, the total for Art Deco in dirhams is 60,056, and that's my total for on the BOQ as well. If I double click on the items, it will show me the total on the BOQ. For the painting items on the BOQ is 60,056. How do these rates come by? There you go. Painting subcontractor, 3.67, which is the factor, currency conversion factor multiplied by 5.18, which is the rate in USD quoted by Art Deco. I'll go on to the next line. Rate in USD quoted by Art Deco. So it's very quick to be assigning currency codes, pricing, when subcontractors are quoted in different currencies. Currency codes can also be used on your material adjudicators. And you know by now, you've been using subcontract and the material adjudicators for a long time. The subcontract adjudicator is linked to the bill items, the BOQ, whereas the materials adjudicator is linked to your resources. So let's go and have a look at the materials adjudicator. We've set up a few packages here. Let's look at the package for fuel. I've got fuel resources, and the resource code you will note as same as the resource codes on your resource list. So you can drag and drop the resources from your resource list onto your materials adjudicator. Let's open up the resource list and keep it on the bottom half. And there, the 4 series is my fuel at the bottom. Now, for the fuel resources, we've got codes from different suppliers. Enoch has quoted, EPCO has quoted, Emirat, and Shell. Now, you will notice for all these 3 quotations, the first 3 quotations, Enoch, EPCO, Emirat, I don't have a currency code. When you don't have a currency code defined or allocated, or there's no currency mentioned specifically against an rate or an amount, that means it defaults to your base currency, your pricing currency, which is AED. However, the rates for Shell, you would notice I've allocated a currency code RO, which tells me that these rates that I've got here are not in dirhams, they are in Omani Riyals, and one Omani Riyal is 10 UAE dirhams. So if I did not have this currency code allocated against this, you would notice that your totals are incorrect. Let me go and how do I allocate a currency code? I can go and type in the currency code in the field, and there you go, your amounts are worked back to AED. Now, if I want to use Shell's rates for my resources, I would just keep my cursor in the rate column for that particular supplier, update resource rates. I would like to use Shell's rates, green tick. And now Candy would ask you, do you want to transfer these rates to the resource list using resource-based rates using your currency code as Omani Riyals? I could have done that, but now I said no, but yes, you could be having resources and your suppliers quoting in a currency other than your base or your pricing currency. Right, so that's multiple currency subcontract and material adjudication. Multiple currency reporting. Okay. Now the rule in Candy is whatever you see on screen can be printed out in a report format. So let's go and have a look. The first on-screen analysis that I would like to show you with the currencies is the trade total display, and I'll be showing you the new trade total display here, the pie. So I click on the trade total display icon, tool button. So I would like to see a trade total display based on my bill quantity using my net rates, and let's recalculate the totals. It works out that your net total for this job is 8.2 million dirhams. It says AED. Right. So this is a quick summary of the job broken down into your trades and resource types. If you'd like to see your selling total, all I have to do is go and change the rate to selling, recalculate. My selling total on this project, my quotation to the client would be for 8.8 million, and this is again in AED. But remember, we had set our primary foreign currencies to be US dollars. We said we want to report to the client in US dollars. How do I now see these totals in US dollars? Go to View, Display Currency, and then you go and select the currency to be displayed. Select the primary foreign currency, and there you'll see your totals in US dollars. You could go and switch your primary foreign currencies at any point in time. So if I go to the blue hammer, go to 5.1, General Settings, I can say, all right, I would like to switch my primary foreign currency to Saudi Riyals. Click on OK. There you see. There is your total in AED, and if you want to see your totals in Saudi Riyals, which is your primary foreign currency now, 8.9 million. Let's go to the blue hammer, change your primary foreign currency back to US dollars, click on OK. So switching between currencies is quite quick, and reporting is quite quick. On the bill, on the blue book, we've got a document. We can use this for client submissions, the selling bill of quantities with PFC, with primary foreign currency. So this is the BOQ, has got the selling rates in AED and the selling amount in AED and US dollars side by side, and the selling amounts as well. If you would like to see your currency splits, yes, we go back to the same document, 3.4, under the blue book, currency split per bill item. Here, not only will it show you your total, it will show you the split for the foreign currencies as well. Now, how does it help me now? Just to show you a quick example. On this project, the total is 8.2 million. Of that 8.2 million, I would be hiring buying resources, or I need to account for 7.6 million AED, UAE dirhams, and I need to account for, I need to buy pound sterling worth 13,000 dirhams here. I need to have Egyptian pounds with 36,000 dirhams. Now let's say, for some example, or just to give you some numbers, or just to show you how will this affect your analysis. Let's say if the GBP, your Great Britain pounds, gets stronger in relationship to your AED. Let's say the pound gets stronger, and just to get some good difference up there, let's say the pound is now, 1 pound is 8 dirhams. 1 pound is 8 dirhams now. Now let's go and have a look. On the same document, you see the total was 8.2 million. Let me click on calculate. Here the totals have gone up. Recalculate the total heading totals. Go back up here and now calculate. Yes, it says that on this job, just because your currency, everything else has remained the same. All I've changed here is I've just gone and updated my currency exchange rate or my factor for Great Britain pounds, and it tells me that you would need much more. You would need 21,000 dirhams. Earlier you needed 13,000 dirhams to buy that amount of pound sterling. Now you need more money to buy the same amount of foreign currency. If I right click, select the currency, select original currency, it says you still need 2,632 pound sterling on this project, but you still, because your currency, the pound sterling has got stronger, you need far more dirhams to buy the same amount, same foreign currency. Let's go back to the blue hammer and let's change this factor or this exchange rate back to 4.95. Now the rule in Candy is whatever you see on screen can be printed. So if I want to print this document as I see on screen, I could come here, there's a printer on the top right on every document. Click on the printer, it says you could actually go and create your report templates under the report manager. Why don't you go to your report manager? I said, no, I don't want to go to the report manager. I would just like to print this report as I see on screen. Just print it. Remember this, when you're printing your report off screen of a document, very minimal customization options are available. I'm going to quickly add my heading colors here, and the printer, I'm going to select landscape, click on OK, and if I preview this report, there's the information which is shown on the Candy screen now in the report format. All that information that I had in Candy printed out in the report format straight from the document, even without getting onto a report manager, even without creating a templates. You would say, I would like to have this information in Excel. No problems. We've got right next to the report tool button, we've got the Excel icon on every document. If I click on that, Candy allows me to export this information straight to Excel. Export. So there is my Excel file at dump. Remember, when you export numbers out of Excel, there's no formulas, it's just numbers that go out. It's neatly formatted, so if you want to use it for any of your other reports in Excel, you could very well use this information. Right. When I tried to print a report from the document, Candy said you'd rather go to the report manager, because on the report manager allows you to go and create report templates. So you could go and create all your report templates in Candy, keep it under a header, and you can keep reusing this template for all your projects in Candy, and that's what we're going to do. That. The shortcut for your report manager is this icon, printer icon right next to the blue hammer. I could also call up my report manager from the menu here, Reports, Estimating Reports Manager. I'm working under the section called Global Reports, and what I've done is set up some standard reports for you under the heading CCS Estimating Report Pack. I set up some reports for the currency. Now, where do I pick up these reports from? Again, from your library, New Report. Go to the section called Analysis Reports. You can go and pick up your currency analysis report, your trade currency analysis, resource type currency analysis, and so on. So let's try, because we've already added this report, let's double click and preview this report to see what information does it generate for you. So it tells you about the plaza sign and building sign that you're buying in pounds sterling. If I come down, have a look at the report. It tells me on this project you need to account for 2,632.6 pounds sterling. If I go to the next page, shows me that I'll be buying a pillar sign in Egyptian pounds. And how much Egyptian pounds do I need? I need to account for 176,000 Egyptian pounds. The next page shows me the Omani Riyal requirement on this project as well. And so on. That's the currency analysis report for you, which is a standard report. The next report that I'd like to show you is the resource type currency analysis, which is the contribution against the currency contribution against your resource types, which is labor, plant, material, and so on. Double click and preview this report. It tells me the foreign currency contribution against your resource types, by your resource types. That's the currency analysis report for you. The next one would be your trade currency analysis. Preview gives you the currency requirement, the foreign currency requirement for trade. The foreign currency requirement, the foreign currency contribution for trade. Now here, all the currencies are expressed in AED. You could choose to express these amounts in their original currencies as well. So a lot of good reports that you could print, generate out of Candy. You could go to New Report. Let's look at one of the latest additions to the report manager, which is the currency analysis bill, which is a new report that we've added. You could go and select that. We've already added it to our list. You could right click and customize that report. You can go and choose columns, what columns you want to be printed on this report. Double click, preview, and there is your currency analysis bill. And you can add and remove columns as you choose, like you would do on the documents, on these new reports. Candy gives you the flexibility to choose what you want to see on those reports. Now, most of the old reports, or most of the other reports in Candy as well, so let's look at the bill of quantities reports now. If I try right-click and customize that report, most of the reports ask you which currency do you want to print this report based on. So you could just need to go and select the currency, and the report will print in the currency code that you've selected. So you've got the currency switch on most reports. Right, then you will ask me, is the use of currency codes only limited to the estimation module in Candy? No, it's got to be used further on as well. Let's go on to planning. And I know planning is one of the unique features in Candy. The Candy planning tool is an intuitive planning tool. You don't need to be a professional planner to be using our planning tool. Even a non-technical person can actually go and use our planning tool. And the beauty with the Candy planning is the ability to link your activities with your bill of quantities. You can link the activities on the bar chart with your bill items. Now, I'm not going to discuss the planning module in detail, but what I would like to show you here is the link between the bill and the program. So let's move on to the next module in Candy, which is Link and Forecast. Blue book here, the document manager. And let's open up the document BOQ with activity allocations. Here, that's my bill with activity allocations. I've got an item, page 1, item C, excavate and foundations not exceeding 2 meter deep. The quantity is 1,125 cubic meters. And I've got resources behind it. I've got my unskilled labor, my digger loader, my excavator, everything working behind that on that bill item. The resources loaded against that bill item. Now, this bill item can be linked to more than one activity. So here you would notice that this item, excavation foundation not exceeding 2 meter deep, is linked to activities A080 and A090. And these activities are starting or happening in different points in the duration of the job. You could also go and spread the quantities against these activities. So you could have a one-to-many, many-to-one link with the activities and the bill items. Now, how does it help me is, if I now start looking at my forecast reports, let's look at the budget forecast. So there is my bill. At the budgeting stage, at the tender stage, Candy said this item is going to cost you 16,000 dirhams. Now, because you linked it to a program, linked it to activity, Candy tells you that you would be spending 6,532 dirhams on clear site in the month of October and 9,798 dirhams in the month of November. That is your forecast net amount or your budget forecast. You could also have a selling forecast. If I go to the blue book, there is my BOQ with the selling forecast. Now again, it's touches upon on planning, but it's quite useful. So now if I click on calculate, so at the bottom of my screen, I've got my selling forecast. In the month of October, the budget is 6,532, but my claim to the client would be for 7,000 dirhams. And you could use it as a backbone for your cash flow, which is also another module in Candy, and it should be all linked together. Now, how does it help with the currency codes? Are we veering off topic? Let's go to the blue book, and if you look at the currency analysis document, here, this report here will give you the foreign currency requirement over the duration of the contract. It tells you we need 130,000 worth of worth of Saudi Riyal for this project, and which month would I need it? Your finance manager would be very happy if he gets this information, because if you're working in an area which is prone to currency fluctuations, this would tell him what kind of forex reserves must we have, what kind of plans must we have, what kind of contingency plans must we have, and he would be able to do some hedging for you if you wanted to. So that's the currency analysis report on the forecasting tab. Moving on to cash flow. Again, a very powerful tool within Candy. The cash flow results could be displayed in currency of your choice as well. Your pricing currency is AED. You could go and define the foreign currencies here in relationship to the pricing currency. So we have defined two currencies for cash flow, US dollars and Egyptian pounds. And you've also defined the exchange rate with respect to your pricing currency. And you said $1 US is 3.67 AED and 1 Egyptian pound is 0.21. However, that rate only holds good, 0.21, up to the end of month 4. Once you've crossed month 5 onwards, up to the end of the contract, the currency exchange rate would be 0.25. And the cash flow results would take into account that. So now, you could display your currency, your cash flow results in a currency of your choice. If you leave this currency code blank, it will display the cash flow results for you, cash in and cash out, money coming in, money out, in the currency code that you've selected. So here, my currency that I've selected for this cash flow results is AED. If I were to plot it on a graph, this is my cash flow results in AED. The same cash flow could be seen in Egyptian pounds with the currency fluctuations over the duration, the currency exchange rates that we've defined. But go back here, go back to my definitions, and here I'll say display my cash flow results in LE, which is Egyptian pounds. Click on OK. And now if you go and calculate your cash flow, you will see that your cash flow, the currency used is Egyptian pounds, and your cash flow results are shown in Egyptian pounds. Showing it on a graph, this is how it looks like. So the tax codes could be used in estimating, you could use it in your forecasting, cash flow as well, and valuations. Now, let's go and have a look about what's next on the agenda. And the next thing would be your tax codes, allocation, and reporting. Getting back onto Candy. Let's move back into estimating. Now, tax codes are used to apply percentages on your base rate to account for your freight charges, taxes, port duties, import duties, and so on. Now, where are these tax codes defined? Again, under the blue hammer in estimating or valuations. We go to the blue hammer, go to 4.3 tax codes, and we've defined 3 tax codes here. Customs duty, D, clearance, and local tax. Now, the tax codes that you define are alphabets. You can define a maximum of 50 tax codes. We've defined our tax code for customs duty to be D, the description, and you've also got a remark similar to the currency code. The tax for the customs duty is applied to be 20%, and you've got tax types. This here, customs duty is defined as a compound tax type. You also have another tax type called as a simple tax type. Now, how do I change from a compound to a simple or vice versa? Just click on the button tax type. The X sign stands for a compound tax type, whereas the plus sign stands for a simple tax type. Let me go and change back my customs duty to be a compound tax type. Okay. So here we've got 3 taxes: customs duty, clearance, and local tax. Customs duty is 20% defined as a compound tax type. Clearance is 2% defined as a compound tax type, and the local tax U is 5% defined as a simple tax type. Now we're going to see what is the impact of these tax types. So let's go back to our resource list. Your tax codes, like your currency codes, are also allocated to simple resources. So let's go back to our resource list R. On our resource list, let's look at cement. There's my OPC bulk 50 kg bags. I'm buying at 28.22 dirhams per bag. And how do I know it's in dirhams? Because there's no currency code allocated. Then there's no currency code allocated against the resource. That means the rate defaults to your pricing currency, which is dirhams. But I've got some tax codes applied here. And my final rate, you would notice, is 35.95. My base rate is 28.22. My final rate is 35.95. Now, how is this 35.95 dirhams calculated? If you double click on it, you're buying your cement at 28.22 dirhams. You've got a 20% customs duty applied on it. You've got a 2% clearance, which applies on the rate calculated so far. And then you've got 5% local tax, which applies on the base rate. And that's how we get to the rate of 35.95. To show this, or to explain this better, let's do a quick example here. I'm going to add a resource here, type M, because it's a material resource. Or let's go and add one down here, under cement. Type M, because it's a material resource, and the resource code that I use this to be in sequence is 31345. This is special cement. I'm buying it per bag. So I copy the unit from above, and my base rate, I'm buying it at 100 dirhams per bag. My base rate is 100, my final rate is also 100. If I double click on that rate, you will notice, because you haven't got any currency codes or discharge or discount or surcharge or tax codes define, your base rate and the final rate are the same. Now here, if I were to go and apply some tax codes, let's do this. So against that special cement, if I double click in the tax code column and if I have to apply my customs duty, which is a compound tax type, 20%, green tick, you will notice your final rate is calculated as 120. How is it calculated? The base rate is 100 dirhams plus 20% of customs duty. So the final rate works out to be 120 dirhams. Now, if I were to go and apply my clearance after this, which is 2%, again compound, you would notice your final rate is 122.40. How is it calculated? Your base rate is 100. You've got a 20% customs duty, which acts on 100. The rate works out to be 120. And now this 2% that you've applied, the clearance, would apply on 120, not 100. The rate calculated so far, because we've defined this tax type as a compound tax type. Now, if I were to go and add my local tax now, you will notice that my final rate works out to be 127.40. How does it work out? Base rate of 100. We apply a customs duty of 20%, which is a compound, which adds on 100. We've got clearance of 2%, which works on the rate calculated so far, which is 120. And then the 5% is a simple tax type that you defined. It will apply on the 100, and the rate works out to be 127.4. And why do I show you this example? The reason being is the order in which you allocate these codes could have an impact on your final rate. Example, instead of applying the tax codes in this sequence, if you applied it as D, which is your customs duty, and then your local tax, and then clearance, you would notice that your final rate changes. Why? It's because now you've got your customs duty on 100, this is 120, the 5% applies on 100, and this 2% applies on the rate calculated so far. That's why it's 125. So make sure that you keep an eye on how you define your currency, the sequence of the tax codes, DTU. If I were to delete a resource, I could select that resource, right-click, and delete it. Yes, and because this resource was not used on any of my worksheets or complexes, it went off. Candy wouldn't let you delete any resource which is used in your pricing. Right, now you've defined your tax code, so you've got tax codes allocated against cement. You can define up to 50 tax codes, and you can go and allocate up to a maximum of 10 tax codes against a resource. And let's go and have a look what else does tax apply on. You've got concrete blocks where you apply tax codes and your solid concrete bricks. Now, how does it impact my bill? If I go and have a look at my bill now, we've set up a document with BOQ with tax split amounts on the blue book, estimating bills. So open up that document now and calculate. Let's go and have a look at your concrete. We've got tax applied on concrete. Tells you how much money would you be spending for that item, customs duty, clearance, and so on, and the totals on this project. How much money would you be spending in all on this project? You'll be spending 503,000 dirhams on customs duty, so much on clearance and local taxes. And you could also get the total against your heading levels. So if you were to look at how much am I paying on tax for my masonry items, there you go, the analysis. Right. I would like to end this session. With a workaround using tax codes. Now, we get a lot of requests from our friends in the MEP department or MEP estimators saying that they would like to see the discounts that they apply to the resources against the bill item. An example being, let's look at the ductwork and the plumbing items here on the BOQ. Now, my ductwork items, the rate is 59.55 dirhams per square meter. Now, this rate is a combination of different resources, material, plant, labor. Now, the estimators want to apply a discount on the sheet metal, just sheet metal. They can't go about applying a discount on the material because if they can't take a discount on the material for this bill item, all the materials, including accessories and all the materials used on this worksheet, which are discounted. So how do I go and show a discount against a particular bill item, and how do I display it against the bill item on the BOQ? You could use the tax codes for this as a workaround. So coming back to the blue hammer, let's define two tax codes. Here, we're going to define a tax code called S. This is for discount on sheet metal. Because it's a discount, I defined with a negative, minus 12. And I type in my remarks, discount, sheet metal. Let me define one more code, P, which is discount PTR, minus 10 because it's a discount, and I'm going to copy the comment above. This is discount on PTR pipes. I'm going to change the tax type to be a simple tax type, discount for sheet metal. I want it to act on the base rate. Change the tax type to be a simple tax type now. Done that. Now I would go and apply these tax codes, alias discount codes on my resources. Now how do I go about doing that? You go to your resource list, and I know all my M&E resources are the 7 series. I could go and open up that heading. I've got my sheet metal here and pipes, polypropylene pipes. Now the sheet metal already has a base rate. I'm buying it in US dollars, so the base rate is in US dollars. I've got a currency code of US dollars allocated against this resource, and my final rate is calculated in AED. I could go and allocate my discount against it or my tax code. So against the sheet metal, I could double click in the tax code column and say, all right, that's the discount for sheet metal. I define it as a tax code, allocate it, and there my final rate is calculated as 52.77 per square meter, where my base rate is 16.3 for US dollars, the currency factor is 3.67, which is used to convert it back to AED, minus a 12% discount. So your final rate, which was earlier 59, without the discount, is 52. So that 12% discount is now worked into the final rate. Similarly, for the plastron pipes, how do I go and apply my discounts as tax codes? Remember, for you to apply tax codes and or currency codes to your resources, you must have a base rate. The plastron pipes, the PPR pipes on my resource list do not have a base rate as yet. I just have a final rate. I'm buying it in the pricing currency AED. I could copy my base rate from the final. So I can say copy from final rate. Yes, so my final rate is now copied into my base rates. My final rate is now copied into my base rates. And here, then I could go and across a range of resources. I could right click, allocate the tax code. And here, this is the discount on PPR pipes. So there is my rate, 1.62. I'm buying at 1.8 dirhams per meter, less than 10% discount. The final rate works out to be 1.62. Now, how does it help me on the bill? How does it impact the bill? If you go and have a look at the BOQ in the background, the book BOQ with the tax split amounts. Let's click on calculate. There it tells you your total for ductwork is 289,000, which is inclusive of that 14% or 14,000 discount on the sheet metal. Your total for PPR pipes, plumbing is 49,000, which is inclusive of that discount on the PPR pipes. And this could be used during finalization when you're negotiating discounts with your suppliers or when you're discussing the discounts to be taken with the management. You could go to the blue hammer, you could use it as your control sheet, and here say, okay, instead of that 12% discount for the sheet metal, if I go and change this to be 15%, click on OK. Let's click on calculate. You would notice that 14,000 is now changed to 15,000 now, 17,000 now. So it's a dynamic document. Any changes that you would make on your definitions, tax code definition, any changes to your tax code factors would impact on the bills. It's quick. It's a boon for the MEP guys. You could also go and print reports, your tax analysis report. Preview. And there, it tells you what is the customs duty that you should be paying, what is the discount on PPR pipes that you consider, what is the discount on the sheet metal, and your clearance and local tax. Right. That's about it for this webinar. Thank you for your time, and I trust that you now have a better insight on Candy foreign currency pricing and tax codes. Please email your queries to the local CCS office if you want to know more about the currency codes and tax codes. We will keep you informed of the next webinar, and remember, if you're unable to join on the mentioned time, please do register for the webinar and you will receive a copy of the recording which can be viewed later to your convenience. Have a great day. Goodbye for now.